What turns you off?
What turns you off?
In general.
What turns me off?
Yeah.
Smugness.
Yeah.
Like, I always ask people, I go, what do you know for sure?
Right.
And it silences them. Because, of course, the answer is nothing.
He's a sharp dude.
Yeah.
You know, like that's such a clever entry for anybody is like, what do you really know?
What is there to do here? Like, what makes for a good life, or what should we be striving for?
Waking up. You're here to see the truth. You're given the opportunity to see the truth, to live the truth. Every human being has that opportunity. I don't walk around telling people that, but if you're gonna interview me about it, I'm gonna say that. That's your opportunity. It's the best opportunity you have by far. If you're inclined that way. If you're not inclined that way, it's fine. But if you're inclined that way, don't settle for anything less than that. It's clearly the most natural truth. And no one whom this occurs to doesn't immediately know that it's true, that it's just how it is.
How could it not be fascinating, folks? He's had, among thousands of others, he's had this awakened experience where he, I don't know, we're going to ask him how to put it. I don't quite know how to put it.
I actually did 2 residencies. So I did a residency in family medicine.
Okay.
Then I did an anesthesiology residency. It's solved.
To figure out.
It's solved.
So I guess that's more the contrast.
To be honest, that feels like I won the cosmic lottery,
Okay.
you know? But I don't walk around saying that to people, and I don't want to make it sound like I have something you don't, because that's not skillful. What I'm interested in is helping people wake up. So someone watching this, who cares about me? You care about you. You want to end your own suffering, or you want to see the truth. You want to live the truth. So let's talk about how to do that. And it doesn't take a long time to wake up. It doesn't take a whole bunch of free time. It takes one really, really deep inquiry in this moment.
So is it like euphoric, or just like
Yeah, a lot of times it's euphoric.
calm? I mean,
It's calm.
okay.
Yeah, calm is probably the most consistent word for it, I would say. But again, it changes all the time, so everything's always in flux. But the non-resistance to the flux itself, the non-resistance to that fluctuation that's always here, becomes kind of a euphoric, ecstatic even.
Okay.
Yeah. Before I was 24, before that event happened when I was 24 years old, I felt like I was stuck inside of my head, and there was like thoughts, and there was an I in there, and it was always trying to figure itself out. It was always trying to figure out what to do, how to be better, how to be okay. It felt shame. It felt defended. It felt separate. And it was always trying to navigate what it perceived to be the external world and other people and so forth. It was very uncomfortable for me. After that was seen to be nothing but just like a collection of thoughts. Even though it felt like very solid and it felt totally central to experience, and it felt like a place I was stuck, that just completely opened up, and there was no inside and outside in that way. There was no place that I was stuck. In fact, even the word I changed dramatically, such that there was no central point to reference back to that I would call I anymore. It was just like everything. It was kind of like saturated into all experience. So all of the sounds and sensations and all of the aspects of consciousness, everything that you might consider to be the wider experience or the wider universe, was all experiencing itself now, instead of me being a central character trying to experience it. Just to use an analogy, it's like an ice cube floating in the water, and it just dissolved into the water.
Okay.
That whole central character thing was just gone, and the whole environment was experiencing itself. And it still is. That didn't change. Just being what it is, it's a endless, beginningless flux. That's what it's happening all the time.
What is this place? You know, we're all here having some unexplainable experience. What is this?
Well, the beauty of that question, that's actually a very good question. The question, what is this? It may sound very basic to some people. It may sound simplistic or almost nonsensical, but it's actually a really good question because it's a very basic, simple, direct, honest, vulnerable question. What is this? What is this experience I've been having? and for some people that experience is suffering. It feels awkward, or to use a Buddhist term, it feels like dukkha, which is unsatisfactoriness. So many people experience life as a kind of, or through a kind of lens of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm going through the motions, I'm doing the things, I'm having a relationship, I'm having, I'm working on career, I'm doing all the things, health, but something underneath all of it just feels unsatisfying. I just would give you the information that you can get it answered for yourself. That's the beauty of this. That's the beauty of what I point to. I can show you how, but I'm not going to tell you the answer. I can show you how you can arrive at it yourself in a very thorough, instinctually clear, lived way.
Is that, I mean, it's just impossible to put words to, so it's not really worth,
That's a good way of saying it.
there's
actually.
there's nothing really to say about it.
Well, until there's a shift in your own experience at the deepest level, and I would say at the identity level, words will always be unsatisfying. They'll just be unsatisfying. I could say all kinds of things about it, but I'm sort of reading a menu to you, and I'd rather just stick the food in your mouth, or show you where the fork is and show you where the food is.
Right.
That's what I do. Or I can use a pretty interesting clip I saw recently of Carl Jung.
Okay.
And someone said to him, when you were growing up, did you believe in God? And he said, oh, yes, definitely believe in God growing up. And they said, do you believe in God now? And he said, now? He said, believe. It's hard to say. I know. I don't have to believe.
I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
So it's something like that.
What happens when we die?
Nothing actually changes. We really misunderstand what death is. We impute the idea of life and death onto natural energetics that are always in flux. So you could say everything is energy. Everything you see is energy. Everything you feel is energy. This is all energy. And I don't mean that necessarily in a spiritual woo-woo way. I mean it in terms of physics. Everything is energy. Or you could say it's forces. Or most accurately, you could say it's fields, right? Quantum field theory says essentially everything is field. It's just interacting fields. That aligns with my experience very, very seamlessly, actually. And from that standpoint, the idea of birth and the idea of death and the idea of life and destruction, reproduction, all these ideas really are imputed by the human onto experience. Experience is the human's interface with energy. But the energetic field, let's say, it's always in flux. It has no beginning, end. It has no demarcations in phases or stages. Those are all sort of human conventions. So one way of saying this would be death and life are an inseparable union. And I can point that out in the immediate experience. In the immediate experience of appearance, these appearances, these colors and forms and apparent forms, shapes and sounds and sensations, which is the kaleidoscope of our experience right now, which the mind adds a whole bunch on top of that turns it into like time and space and all that. But the actual direct experience is simply those appearances. Those appearances themselves don't have a source. They're just here. They don't have a source. They don't have a trailing edge. They don't have a history. Everything is completely fresh and new right now, as if it's appearing out of nothing. But there's not even a nothing for that to appear out of. It's just here. So it has this innocence and freshness. I could call that life. And on the other side, it's not going anywhere. It's dissolved as soon as it's appeared. It's disintegrated as soon as it's integrated. There's no destination. There's no accumulation. So in that sense, it's death. Death and life are an inseparable union. And the tip of that sword is experience. And the fact that we can experience that all is quite a miracle. And to live on the tip of that sword, moment to moment, is really the miracle of miracles, that that's even possible.
Do you think anymore, or you just dismiss thoughts, or how would you?
Yeah, I would say there's no sense of a thinker. Thoughts can appear, just like anything can appear, but they're not very interesting. And don't define much, and they don't even fully form most of the time. And a lot of the time there aren't thoughts. So it's more like the textures of the senses that we call them the senses because it's almost like we're looking through sense portals. But when the realization occurs, there's no portals, just those appearances that we call the senses, like, again, sounds and sensation and forms and colors and all. They kind of just dance and experience themselves.
Okay.
That's the experience.
Yeah.
And there's no one apart from it anymore.
So no internal monologue.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There's probably like multiple tracks running simultaneously.
But there's some report where like 40% of people don't report having an internal monologue.
Yeah. There's a couple categories. I think some people are so identified with the thoughts they don't realize that that's what that is.
Right.
So they will almost always identify that there's thinking of some kind, there's belief, but they don't hear it as such. So they're not able to like differentiate themselves from a thought. But for instance, if somebody is sitting in a room and stands up to walk into another room, they know what's on the other side of the door. If they didn't know what's on the other side of the door, that would mean having no thoughts at all.
Yeah.
So if you had no thoughts at all, you're awake. You have to be.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're conscious.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this shift, it didn't affect your ability to move through the world. I mean, you went to medical school after.
Yeah. It makes it easier, actually. In some sense, there's another sense that I guess it's a couple things. One is it makes it easier because your mind isn't clouded with a bunch of like random thoughts that don't do anything, like doubt thoughts and mind wandering about time and past and future. When that stuff isn't there and the mind is calm, presence just really starts to shine forth. You have more attention and energy available, essentially, is what I find.
Yeah.
The other side of it, though, is things that require a lot of mental processing, even though it doesn't require thought, it requires a lot of mental activity, like memorization specifically, or doing like long reading. You can do it, or I was able to do it, but there's such a deep part of me that's like, it'd be so easy not to do this right now. I could just relax. Because when there wasn't relaxation before, it was almost like I could use that leverage to make myself do things that were uncomfortable. But things like things that require a lot of cognitive processing that are somewhat uncomfortable, now it's like, oh, I could just stop and feel deeply peaceful, not doing anything at all.
I have some rapid fire like statements here.
Sure.
Just to kind of get your quick reaction to.
Sure.
These are things that I've heard said. Earth is a school for our soul, and we reincarnate until we learn our lessons.
I mean, I don't know about that. That doesn't resonate with me necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a bit new agey.
You need to raise your vibration to manifest your desires.
Nah, that
Doesn't do
not my
anything.
vibe.
Doesn't do anything for you. Your thoughts create your reality.
Well, they don't create reality, but they create your reality until you wake up from them. So in the sense that, like I was saying before, we have this experience of being in a world where I know what everything is, I know who I am, I know what that is, I know who you are, and it's this kind of world of judgment and fractionation. From that standpoint, we are creating that world out of thought without realizing it, without realizing the cost of doing that. When we wake up from that, we realize, oh, reality is not that. That was my version of reality seen through the veil of thought. Actual reality, you don't create this with thought. It's almost like flipped completely on its head. It's a cosmic joke, right? Like you can't create any of this. This is here. It's already happening. And to some degree, that's why there's a challenge with people who have a very strong sense of control at first waking up, because they don't want to see that they actually don't have that control that they think they do through thought.
Yeah.
But the strange thing is thoughts aren't controlling anything anyway. They're just dissociating
Okay.
in more complex ways.
Yeah.
But when you wake up to what is, you see, of course, you're not in control of this appearance.
Yeah.
By the time you register, it's already in the past. It's already, right?
Do you like the analogy of like on a ship, a kid with the fake steering wheel, standing there thinking he's, maybe not thinking, but like imagining he's in control of the ship?
I have a friend who's a Zen Buddhist, and he says, you think you're in the driver's seat, and then when all is said and done, you realize you weren't in the driver's seat, you were in the trunk.
Why is there something instead of nothing?
Oh, well, in in the most direct experience, the experience of something and the experience of nothing are completely interpenetrated. So
Okay.
there can't be something without nothing, and there can't be nothing without something. And yet both can simultaneously exist in relation to one another.
Okay.
And that's experienced at a very deeply felt place, or in a very deeply felt place. It's not conceptual.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say just the concept of nothing proves there couldn't be like true nothing? You know, are you well beyond even thinking about things that way?
That's a good way of putting it. Even to say that there's obviously something. Well, there's obviously appearance, right? But if we want to be really precise, and we're getting like into the deep end of the pool right away, but if we want to be precise, what do you actually experience right now? What do you experience? You experience sound. You experience like voice, but even without those labels, there's still sound, and there's ambient sound, and you experience forms and colors and shapes, shades, lines, and so forth. But even to label those requires thought. But if you actually look out and see what's really there, you don't see things necessarily. You impute thingness onto what's being seen. So this is, again, deeper stage realization stuff. But at some point it becomes obvious. And even after awakening, and after a lot of sort of shadow work people end up doing after awakening and deepening of their insights, people are almost universally surprised when that final illusion of form drops away. I mean, in very real time, they will just suddenly be like, whoa, there is literally nothing here. But that nothing isn't, as you said earlier, it's not a conceptual nothing. It's not something called nothing. It's not like a black space like your mind it imagines it. It's so different than that. It's in a sense, it's like a rich, it's a deeply saturated experience of no thingness, no object, because to have an object, you have to have a subject. And that subject-object relationship also kind of falls apart here. And so the sense of being a me, apart from a whole world out there and other beings, other people, other me's, that relationship itself is seen through. So it stops functioning as I'm here, everything else is out there. And what actually goes away with that is surprising. The sense of isolation really starts to dissolve with that. Because what is seen when that perceptual filter falls is that the sense of isolation, the sense of always trying to move towards something else, or find something, or find the right person, or find the right experience that has that relational feel that always makes you feel separate. When that stops happening, it's like all of a sudden, oh, this sense of separation itself is actually an illusion. The sense of isolation is a thought, actually. So when that drops away, there's a sense of immersion that's continuous. That sense of immersion, which is not technically something immersed into something else, because that's dualistic. It's actually, the immersion is primary. It's a primary immersive experience. When that becomes your ongoing experience, it becomes much easier to start seeing through things in that sense, seeing through form itself.
Yeah.
So these things kind of fall like dominoes. They're sometimes called fetters, like in Buddhism, fetter meaning like essentially an attachment or assumption that turns out not to be true if you look closely enough at it. So as sci-fi as this might sound, or as psychedelic as what I'm talking about might sound, this actually occurs. People will have these dominoes fall and these illusions disappear, and you can actually live that way.
Is there a God?
Oh, another question that I almost always answer this question the same way, because I would never want to cheat anybody out of the experience of figuring it out for themselves.
Okay.
Part of the problem is what you mean by God, what I mean by God, what anyone means when they say God is going to vary quite a bit, really. But God as a thought, God as an idea, God as an image in the mind of a certain person, maybe a masculine or feminine, depending on what religion you're coming from. Those aspects of God, I can tell you right away, those are thoughts. But are those thoughts pointing to something? That's the real question. And I would never cheat anybody out of finding the answer to that question. But again, these are imputing human qualities or human ideas onto another human idea of God. But again, the question is, does that point to something real? Is it like archetypal? And that's what's interesting, right? Just like what we're talking about, awakening, or this possibility of transformation at the deepest level of our identity. Is that something I'm just talking about? Just a bunch of words, thoughts, ideas? Or is it archetypal in that it's actually pointing to a possibility? And it turns out it's pointing to something very real because it happens for people, and it happens for people frequently.
Suffering is necessary for the growth of the soul.
Suffering is mostly necessary to wake up. And so if we want to call that the growth of the soul, I would agree.
Okay. Karma follows us between lives.
I would say that's accurate. Yeah. It does seem accurate, although when we think in terms of a person moving from one lifetime to another in the usual way the mind would put it together, I don't think that's accurate, but there does seem to be karmic threads. And those karmic threads do affect you as you perceive yourself right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why
and strangely, the karmic glue is actually your self-perception. That is the karmic glue. That's what makes that karma sticky.
Okay.
And karma is just causality.
Why would a feeling of suffering exist or like be allowed to exist? That's kind of a common thing people ask.
Yeah. Well, the suffering issue for me, I can tell you, like personally, I grew up and spent the first 24 years of my life with a good amount of suffering, but it was the type of suffering I'm talking about is this unsatisfactoriness, a sense that something's off, something's wrong. When I was going through it, it felt horrible, felt miserable, like as you would imagine it would, right? From the standpoint of thought, of course, that like who wants to feel like something's wrong with me all the time? However, what it did was it turned my attention inward and it allowed me to inquire in the ways we're talking about into the nature of my own identity or the nature of truth, let's say. But it was a very real and direct inquiry, and it was fueled by that sense of unsatisfactoriness. So even though it felt very uncomfortable, it led me into a process. And what happened through that process and after that process led me to, let's say, where I'm at right now. And from this perspective, I see that was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it's really a matter of perspective. From the standpoint of being identified with thought and feeling small and separate and apart from everything, from that standpoint, it's horrible experientially. From the standpoint of realizing none of that was true, and to put it bluntly, because I don't have a good way to talk about it in words, but to realize like you are already everything, that everything is just complete aliveness, inseparable, there aren't parts to it, and it's always immediately here, and it's uncaused, and it's brilliant and deeply rich. To realize that and to see it from that standpoint, that little nuclear bomb of dissatisfaction inside that little seeming small self was the best thing that ever happened to it.
Why do I feel like me constantly? I never feel like a tree or a fence or another person, you know?
Because of self-consciousness. Yeah. Okay. Self-consciousness is only a thought, but it's a tenacious thought.
Okay.
And you can break that spell.
Okay.
You'll be surprised when all of a sudden the feeling of you and the feeling of that tree, neither one feels more like you anymore.
Okay.
That's what happens in non-dual realization.
Okay.
Time is a prison.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody, no matter what circumstances you are in outwardly, you could be in very unfortunate circumstances, you could be in fortunate circumstances, but I think anyone who looks closely enough will agree that the feeling of being stuck in time is fundamentally uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Like, does it ever feel good to think, oh, I have so many things to do today and I only have so much time to do it? And, you know, like just having one thought like that and believing it is kind of confining, makes things feel tight, makes things feel like you don't have enough. It comes from a place of like lack. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you just let that mind relax and open up to what is in this moment, it's brilliant. It's rich.
Yeah.
It's settled, but it's also responsive. Settled meaning it's relaxed, it's calm, but it's also responsive. It's not hesitating either. Reality doesn't hesitate. It just moves on its own volition, spontaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one thing to understand that, and it can be freeing to understand it, and it's a good pointer. But to live it is freedom. To live that constant flux without attaching to any part of the flux and having no separate sense that I'm like at the mercy of the whole thing. It's just like being that flux without any particular destination or any particular source. It's always here right now. So then time falls away totally. The distinction I will make in terms of time for anyone listening is the word immortal means like in a span of time forever. But the word eternal means not subject to time at all. It's like outside of time. It means time essentially doesn't exist.
Right.
This experience is eternal. It's every time and no time at all. It's time. It's literally timeless. And that may, again, sound, I don't know, like far-fetched, but anyone watching this has had that experience for moments, at least brief moments. Often it comes in moments of, strangely, it can be moments of like sort of overwhelming joy, like say the birth of your child, seeing your child for the first time, or holding a child or something like that. Mm-hmm. But ironically, it can also come in moments of tragedy. So losing a loved one and then feeling that frustration, and, you know, your mind wants to make it other than it is, but at some point it has to stop because it is how it is. And there's a relinquishing there, there's a release there, and there's a timelessness that comes with that. So it can come at any time, so to speak, timelessness, or the breakthrough to timelessness can come at any moment in life. But when it comes, it's universally recognized as peaceful, as a kind of freedom, as a kind of release from that bondage of thought, the bondage of thought of like who I am and where I'm going and what I have to do and
the consequence of it.
The consequences of it, how much responsibility I have and all this. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so unnecessary, all that thought.
Earth is a prison planet, and we're being preyed upon by archons who keep tricking us into reincarnating.
I have no comment.
No comment. But should people be fearful of that?
No.
No.
That's just, you know, to the degree that you are fearful of any thought, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, thoughts. But it shows you, like, right, we can imagine all kinds of things in thoughts and then react to the thoughts and fear and push and pull on thoughts. What I'm talking about is waking up from all of that, waking up from that whole world of imagining this, imagining the problems, imagining the solutions, whether they're fantastical like that or they're mundane, like the normal things we think about on a day-to-day basis. They're all different versions of the same thing. You can wake up from all of that.
Speaking of eternal life, one of my questions here is Jesus important?
Well,
he talks about eternal life.
Depends who you ask, right? I consider, to me, Jesus is, again, like an archetype. So there are archetypes from different cultures, different religions. I consider archetypes awake beings, or someone like Jesus an awake being. He existed in a time and place that was very unique to him and to Judaism and all of it, and it has obviously tremendous historical value and importance, and it shaped the last 2,000 years of civilization, Western civilization, actually, in a lot of ways, all of civilization. But the features of his life, the features of what he said and what he pointed to, were not that different than, say, things like Buddha pointed to, or Lao Tse, or other awakened beings. So that's how I see it.
Okay.
But it's of course clothed in the religion of the time. It's clothed in the language. It's clothed in the storytelling and parables and all. So yeah.
Do you think a lot of that's like just like redefining things like heaven and hell and sin and eternal life, even? You know, because if you grow up religious, you have kind of the traditional conceptions of all those, but those can be talking about a lot of the similar things to the awakened experience.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So to me, like the symbolism of Christ is powerful from my own experience, from this standpoint. Many Christians wouldn't agree, or maybe have never heard this way of speaking about it. But the resurrection to me is awakening. The resurrection is realization. That is every day of the week for me symbolic of the possibility of transformation at the deepest level and resurrection from your own ashes. That's what it symbolizes to me. So that's the crux of his existence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like that what he talked about was very much, from the Buddhist standpoint, it'd be like metta, which is compassion.
Okay.
Yeah. That's service and compassion. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So it really depends which motifs of his life you emphasize in a way, or what religion you kind of build around it. But I don't think he would have even thought a religion needed to be built up around him based on the stories in the Gospels and so forth.
Yeah.
But
so would you say it's like hell being a state of mind that is farthest or farther from being able to have this realization?
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty much.
So sin would be like actions that take you farther from being in a place where you can enter into this realization. How would you say that?
Sure. Sin to me is something like knowingly going unconscious in a given moment. I don't feel any moralistic aspect to that or moralistic tone to that. To me, sin is not a moralistic thing, and I think it actually translates to missing the mark, something like that. So it's missing the mark of, well, what is it missing the mark of? It's missing the mark, to me, of your own spiritual potential, which is right now, which is your ability to go deeper right now, to see more clearly right now, to align with truth more fully right now, to let go of your own delusion more right now. That's the mark. So in one sense, we're all sinners. Yeah, if you want to put it in some Christian terms, because we can't be on the mark 100% of the time, but we can make an effort. And so to me, yeah, missing the mark is probably more significantly missing the mark, like almost purposely going unconscious, or distracting, dissociating, all these things. But ultimately, even that is innocent. We have the opportunity at every single moment to sort of retrain our aim and point that arrow more toward the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there consequence to that, or like why, if everything's now and fine, then like why? I don't know. I have more questions along this line.
Sure.
But like, if you can tell what I'm getting at, just like, why do those things that align you with the realization if there's no reason to, or like?
Yeah. Well, I'll make a distinction between sort of relative and absolute, right? Absolute, from the absolute aspect, everything really is fine. There's a deep okayness. This comes with this first shift, this first awakening. There's a very, very deep okayness that comes online that is unshakable, and everything really is okay. And you feel it in your marrow. It's a very it's grace is what it is, but it's a very deeply felt experience. That's the absolute aspect. In the relative aspect, you don't lose the ability to discern something that's harmful to you versus something that is helpful to you in some way. But the relative world is relative, right? Have you ever heard the phrase, to the lobsters in the kitchen, the sinking of the Titanic was a miracle?
Okay.
So it was horrible for the people,
right?
But the lobsters were free suddenly, or whatever. Yeah. So that's just a pointing to the relative world, right? In the relative world, there are competing agendas all over the place. Yeah. So we do our best to navigate that. Now, what I find is that without that absolute aspect, without that orientation to truth, in the relative world, what happens, I think, is we get more and more unconscious. We have much more chance of harming ourselves and others when we're unconscious, when we're thought identified, when we're living in that internal world of separation and me, right? It's a self-centered way of experiencing. Once that self-centered spell has broken and continues to integrate into the realization that is that appears, that selfishness starts to dissolve, and we start to orient more toward a kind of greater good, more toward balance of that absolute realization, that absolute aspect, and the relative aspect. And with that balancing, we see that we stop being as harmful to ourselves and others. Mm-hmm. But put in the right conditions, and fear is the right condition, groups of people can act very, very unconsciously and violently in various ways. So the cost of mind identification is very real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as someone who's awakened, people who've had this experience, are they beyond ever entering back into that unconsciousness?
I would say after a first shift, there's certainly a lot of unconsciousness still going on. But what happens, strangely, it's a kind of poetic justice in a way. What happens is, because you're much more conscious, when you do harmful things, let's say you do something harmful to another person, it may not be overtly harmful, but it's harmful in some way. You feel it as if you just did it to yourself. Okay. All of a sudden, it feels different. You start to really register like, oh, wow, that's what it feels like to harm. And so it sort of widens your view, it widens your scope of experience, widens your sample size of what you're taking in regard to your own behavior. Yeah. And as that happens, you become more sensitive and more aware of how you're affecting everything around you. So the rebalancing isn't because you're patting yourself on the back going, oh, I'm a enlightened person now. It's because you have no choice, because your body doesn't like pain.
You must become childlike in order to enter the kingdom of heaven.
I totally agree. Yeah. Okay. again, wonder. What is the entry point? Wonder, right? It's like I think the story behind that was Christ was talking to some people, and a child was trying to come through the crowd, like trying to peek in, and some of the elders were like kind of pushing the child back, like, no, get out of here. We're talking to Jesus. And he said, no, let the child through. He said, you're never going to enter the kingdom of heaven until you become like this child. That's one story, but there are a few times I think he mentioned that, including in the Thomas Gospel. And that's very poignant and very accurate. And what it points to me is innocence and wonder, right? Because an adult says, oh, well, of course I know there's a history and I know all this stuff about brain function and I know about, whatever we think we know about. But that adult has been so hypnotized through the lens of thoughts that they've never stopped, or they haven't for many, many years stopped to see what happens if I back out of that lens, because I'm only using thoughts to know all that. But the child might go, these things are happening, these thoughts, where are these thoughts coming from? What is this? Who am I? Right? The child has more like spaciousness in their experience of consciousness, more ability to become curious in a different way. So yeah, that kind of childlike wonder it allows you to kind of step backward and register your more primary experience. And I think that's hugely valuable.
Does that kind of going along with, like, if you develop an identity that's tied to things, that's kind of the opposite of childlike, where things you become sure of become your identity, and it makes you less able to question those or strip things away.
Oh, totally.
To return to the state of just pure wonder, which seems like should be constant. I mean, I'm not in it much, but like just with a small step back again, like just the wonder of everything. So.
Yeah, think of how when things really solidify in your mind about, I know how this is. I'm sure I know how this is. I know how this person is. I know how he is. I know how she is. Then we start judging before we even actually know anything about someone. We presuppose things about groups of people, about the way everything is. It becomes so solid, but it also becomes very heavy, right? It feels so cumbersome and unwieldy to have that. And it becomes kind of arrogant at some point. Yeah. So what that statement is pointing to is going all the way back in the other direction. Admitting that you actually don't know.
Do all bodies have souls? How would you respond to that?
There's a very interesting historical distinction, and it's kind of the fundamental distinction actually between Hinduism and Buddhism, and it has a historical origin. And in Buddhism, the distinguishing feature is something called anatta, which means essentially no self or no soul. Whereas in Hinduism, the Atman, which is the personal soul with realization, is seen to be the Brahman, which is like the universal soul. So there's an interesting distinction in the doctrine, and I understand both sides of it, actually. I can see how both interpretations make sense, but I would probably lean more toward the anatta side of things, in that there's nothing continuous in my experience anymore at all.
Okay.
And that might sound strange, like, well, Angelo, don't you just move through the day and move through your life and have continuity? I can speak in those terms, and I can even recognize thoughts that seem to make that look that way. But in the direct experience, which is before thought, it doesn't look like that at all. It actually looks like appearances appearing out of nowhere, like almost like a camera flashing. That's how reality is experienced.
Okay.
So, from that standpoint, there's nothing moving from moment to moment. There couldn't be a soul in the way we think about a soul. Now, now there can be karmic residue too, though. There is cause and effect, strangely. Even though this is not happening in time, causality seems to exist. There is conditions, and conditions do affect appearances. That's the best way I can explain that. But it's not in time. It's not temporal.
Right. Is anything sacred?
Everything's sacred.
Everything. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm not sure how I would define that, but that's kind of like, is there a God, in a way, that question? But yeah.
Well, yeah. Again, words. It's important in this whole entire conversation to understand that words are only as good as what they point to. Right. So if I say there's a skull sitting right there, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I'm pointing to something that you and I would probably agree that's a skull. But if I say consciousness, where your attention goes and where my attention goes may be completely different.
Yeah.
It may not be, but so when we use words like sacred, we could be meaning such different things.
Right.
Yeah, and we could interpret the same thing. We could be experiencing the same thing and interpret with totally different words.
Right.
What you may feel as sacredness, I may feel as energy, for instance.
Yeah, it's just another symbolic layer.
Exactly.
What are animals? Are we different from animals? Are we special? It's a common question, people would have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't feel like we're special or like a higher state of consciousness. We do have we have something extra, and that is self-consciousness that only certain animals have. But I think it turns into arrogance pretty quickly when we think that makes us better or special or more important or anything. I actually see animals as very awake in a sense. They're not knowingly awake because they're not knowingly self-aware, right? Mm-hmm. But they move in a very, very simple and natural way that resonates with my own energetic experience, which is funny because I never saw that before I woke up. I've never been aware of it, but now it's obvious. So there's something really, a sense of harmony with the animals through their conscious presence in the world and the way they move through the world. Eckhart Tolle said, I've met many Zen masters and they're all cats.
Okay, yeah. Because they're not thinking? I mean, is that one
Probably.
way to put it?
Exactly. They're very aware, but they're not thinking. They're not conceptualizing. They're present.
Yeah.
They're not somewhere else in their mind. They're not wandering off into past and future and wondering if they're a good dog or a bad dog.
Yeah. I was listening to Paul Hederman a couple of weeks ago and something stood out. He's like, a golden retriever isn't thinking about playing fetch next week or worrying about whether,
whether
like
you're going to
that.
catch
It's
the
like,
ball.
yeah, it's just excited. Is science important?
Yeah. But not for this, not for awakening necessarily.
All relative, I mean.
Yeah, I think so. I think I prefer clear thinking in the relative world, precision and, not fooling yourself and so forth. One thing I want to make a distinction about is I think some people will associate awakening or spirituality or whatever with a kind of woo-woo mentality where you kind of believe anything and there's not really discernment and relative thought. I don't associate those two at all. To me, actually, this process of inquiry, of looking inward and seeing what your direct experience of yourself is right now, is kind of like the ultimate empiricism. Mm-hmm. Because a thought is, when you see that a thought is really just something that comes and goes, but it's not you, then the ultimate empirical act is to actually look at what you are then. The only thing left to do is really become curious about what you actually are in this moment. Yeah. So to me, that's like the ultimate empirical act, and science is, of course, empiricism. Yeah. So to me, the act of self-inquiry or the inquiry into the nature of truth in very real time, if you're precise with it, is actually pretty scientific in a sense. Yeah.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, and this is an important one, understanding like neurophysiology, understanding functional MRI studies about choice and consciousness and so forth, that can be deceptive if you want to wake up, in that you might think understanding that is going to wake you up. I don't see that happening. I've seen people wake up all kinds of different ways, but they don't wake up through understanding brain function, understanding cognitive function from like a scientific standpoint and so forth. So science is important, but it's like, how do you use it and what do you use it for, right? So understanding, gaining knowledge, gathering knowledge, well, really, it's not actually science, right? Knowledge is the result of science. Science is the act of investigating, right? Yeah. But yeah, just learning about, say, brain function, consciousness, and so forth, and also just learning about doctrine, the historical doctrine in Buddhism and Hinduism, gathering information, gathering more and more and more knowledge is not actually what wakes people up. And that's very obvious to some people, but to other people, that sounds like heresy even. Like of course it is. Of course you just read doctrine until you wake up. But that's not actually how this works. So I just want to be clear about that understanding from a scientific perspective, understanding even from a doctrinal perspective, aren't actually what leads to awakening.
Right.
It's a much more personal thing.
It's just kind of all, I mean, do you like the map analogy? Like science is mapping what is or what is perceived, but it's not effective it's unable to step out of that because it's a result of being inside of that.
Exactly.
So Just on the far reaches, it has kind of a ceiling.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm not saying it's useless study or knowledge or anything. It's all very interesting. I think it's interesting, but it's not what woke me up, and it's not what wakes people up.
I took salvia and I experienced being a tree for 100,000 years. What do you think that is, or in your
perception? For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Perception, in the way I usually talk about it, it's a deeper, more fundamental layer of thought, more fundamental to the overlay that makes everything look dimensional, time and space, and so forth.
Okay.
It's not so much a gross thought; it's a subtle thought, but that's still just a distortion in perception.
Okay. Would you say it's a thought or story?
Yeah. What can you know about history right now? So any of these questions, for anyone listening, test it out yourself. What can you know about history? Well, I know the Romans had this Roman Republic lasted 700 years and the Roman Empire lasted 650, whatever. Well, how do you know that right now? Thoughts. Someone taught you that, right? What do you know that's even more primary than a thought? That's right now, right? But history, all of it is thought. Your only access point to history is through thought.
Yeah.
I'm not discounting history in the relative sense, but everything we talk about is experiential here. So it's really a matter of like looking deeply into your experience right now and seeing what is a thought and what is not a thought. And when you see how much actually is thought, and how all of those thoughts in some sense are just on an equal playing field, whether it's 2,000 years ago thought, or whether it's a thought about what I'm going to do after this conversation, or a thought about what I had for breakfast, seeing that those are like all just appearing right now. They're sort of equally true in that they are appearing right now.
Yeah.
And suddenly, what else is appearing? What are they appearing in? What are those thoughts appearing in? There's only one place to look now, and we're here. And this one place doesn't need a name, doesn't need any particular label, and it's not referencing anything in time. That's the key to seeing this. Every thought, in some sense, is referencing time. So a thought about 2,000 years ago is referencing time. A thought about 10 minutes ago is referencing time. But there's something here that's not referencing time. You could say it's what's aware of the thoughts, perhaps. But again, it's not a thought that you want to use to confirm it, more curiosity to saturate yourself into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with practice, by doing that, that's when this shift occurs. But how do you find that transformation, or how do you induce that transformation, right? That's the question. Wonder is a very good entry point, because wonder is all around us. And that can appear in all kinds of settings. It can appear in nature. It's very common for people like in nature, walking in nature and so forth. They feel the wonder or expansiveness or something like that. Or we can use a tool, or we can use a practice like inquiry, self-inquiry. The idea is to lead you right into wonder, essentially, to lead you into the place where there's a kind of gap between thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And wonder is the catalyst. When I ask you, well, what do you really know? Well, you might think of thoughts about yourself. Like, I know I'm so-and-so person. I have this name and this age. But how do you really know that in this moment? Well, there's a thought that tells you that. And then another thought says, but I learned it a long time ago. It's like, well, that's another thought. But what do you really know right now? That's not thought, right? Because let's say someone injected some false thought into your mind that said, I'm the Queen of England or something, right? That's not accurate, but it is a thought. But the real question is, who or what is it that's aware of those thoughts in the first place? And that's always right here. It's always right now. That kind of inquiry leads you into, again, a sense of wonder, but it also leads you beyond that hiccup of what do you really know based in thought. Or maybe the question is there something that's knowable without thought? Right. That's how we enter this process almost always. Almost every time, no matter how we do it, the entry point is what is really knowable right now without using a thought to confirm it.
Okay.
And that's available for that way of inquiring is available to anybody. Yeah. Any age, anything. Yeah.
So with history, would you say, it's kind of like the outer space thing too, are these just extrapolations of what is now to make this environment make sense? Is that how you would?
Totally. Time and history are what the mind requires to make this energetic field appear as something solid, something that makes sense, something that can be causally understood. And that's it. It's just trying to make sense out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of a traditional view is like, well, just the pure happenstance. We're on a miracle planet, the perfect distance from a star. But the other side of that is, no, all of that exists because, or like, yeah.
I think that's really good, what you're saying, because, yeah, what is, I mean, I think your clarity on what is right here seems to be there.
Okay.
Because you see that it's not that. It's not that storyline. It's not that narrative. It's not that thinking about history and conceptualizing. So then does all that actually do anything?
Yeah.
Is it necessary?
Yeah. No, I mean.
Not really.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not certainly not necessary for this to be here, for this
Yeah.
experience to be here, this primary experience of aliveness.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating when you see that.
Yeah. I think I can understand what can't be.
Yeah.
You know, in a way. So then maybe it's just a matter of furthering that into what is then.
Yeah. And just staying with what is long enough. Yeah.
Death will be like taking off a VR headset.
I like that.
Like that one? Mm-hmm. Okay. But like,
Well, the point is you can take the headset off before you physically die.
because there is no point of death, or yeah.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you rather take the headset out being wide awake and before the body physically dies away?
Yeah. I mean, I would say so.
Yeah.
You said awakening is like the most important thing to do in this life. Why would this experience of being trapped in a self even exist, or how would you filter that question? You know, why, if that's not the point, to like live out this experience feeling like a limited, fearful being, you know, then why awaken to get out of that, or like why push out of that?
You know, I like that Carl Jung had this way of saying human consciousness is at an unstable stage of evolution. We are, as humans right now, at an unstable stage of evolution of consciousness, and we need to take the next step in that evolution. That registers, again, that's a map. You can put any map on this, but that registers as pretty accurate if you kind of look at how we've sort of come up through, like we're talking about animals, they are conscious, but not quite self-conscious. As soon as we take that self-conscious step, we have the ability to become internal and dissociate and doubt ourselves and on and on and on, think and ruminate. So that's kind of uncomfortable. It's for some people, it's very uncomfortable. So the next stage of consciousness is waking up from that.
Yeah.
And that loop can actually kind of turn back around, is one way of saying it.
Okay.
That loop of becoming self-conscious kind of turns back around, and it's just like open consciousness.
Yeah. What do you make of the near-death experiencers? What is that from your perspective? You know, they kind of all describe a similar thing, a more like an eternal soul that maybe passes through lifetimes, or just more so is having a temporary human experience now and like returns home to a state of bliss and peace.
Yeah. What they're describing to me sounds very much like what consciousness feels like to me. So the experience of unbound or infinite consciousness, when it's not bound by the illusion of a separate self, feels exactly like that. It feels like light. It is experienced as light. It feels vast, oceanic, deeply peaceful, feels like home. So when people describe those experiences, often what I register is the experience of consciousness.
Okay.
And it makes sense because, you know, when your other body faculties and your mental faculties are shutting down, that may be the last thing that goes before you're completely unconscious, is just this openness of consciousness without ego boundaries. So that's what I think it is. And the good news is you can experience that without a near-death experience.
Okay.
You can wake up to that, and that's what we're talking about.
So like the forms they describe and the stories they tell, is it just another form of thought?
I think they're
within-
archetypal. I think they're archetypal forms of consciousness. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Because, you know, that arena feels very like comforting and inspiring, you know, like, because it's almost like I'm me still, you know, and I just go to better place or whatever. And then this more, I don't know, more pure, more fundamental, non-dual understanding feels like terrifying in a way compared to that, because I guess it's just even further from the concept of the self, or like what you can what you can be okay with without experiencing it. You know.
Yeah, this process of realization that we haven't really talked about as such necessarily, but it does come in stages for sure. And what I generally find is people are ready for the stages as they play out, and they also make more sense. To try to understand it from an identified thought process, to like imagine what it's like when there's pure consciousness, you might be able to have a sense of that. But it's like, well, then when even consciousness is seen to be just a function of appearance, like that's a hard thing to imagine. It's not imaginable so much. It's only experienceable or experiential. So what I generally say and generally find is that people are ready for these stages as they unfold. Although there can be fear, of course, that can come up, but it comes and goes. It's okay. There's a nice analogy with the archetype of the magician, or the jester archetype, being the same one. That the gateway emotion to the magician archetype is fear, which is also curiosity, which is also wonder. So if you're experiencing fear, it means there's transformation. Like that's the magician's energy, is transformation. There's a lot of transformation in your life that's going to correlate to fear sometimes, and that's okay. So there are going to be stages and shifts that can bring fear, that can bring wonder, that can bring very, very profound sense of sacredness, and these experiences will also come and go to some degree. But when all is said and done, what is left is a sense of deep peace, deep okayness, freedom, and that doubt and the cognitive fears and those things, they just kind of dissipate, go away.
Okay. Yeah.
And presence is always bright and alive right here.
What do you make of the life review reports? A lot of the near-death experiencers report, where you experience your life or major life events, or more so minor life events you didn't think of, from the perspective of the people you impacted positively or negatively, and all that. It's like you experience it from all angles.
Yeah. Again, when you have access to unbound consciousness, you have access to a whole lot. And it was kind of like what we were talking about before when we talked about causing harm. When you start to see more universally and you experience consciousness more universally, if you do something harmful to another, you feel it yourself. That's the other side of that, is you're starting to experience consciousness in a more expanded way, so you can start to see it from other perspectives, right? You see yourself from other people's perspective and so forth, because you're not so contracted into that little container of ego boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who says, I had a life review, it was God showing me my life so I could learn my lessons? You know, that seems like a traditional sentiment.
Yeah.
Is that just a way,
say
a way of categorizing?
I would just ask them what they want to do with that. You know, I don't impose anything on anybody. Like, I don't tell anybody that they should wake up or need to wake up or anything like that. But if somebody wants to talk in terms of these kinds of archetypal features or near-death experiences or any of it, and they're talking to me about it, I'm always curious, and I'll probe a little bit into, like, where do you want to go with that? Yeah. How deeply do you want to go into that experience?
Okay.
Or how deeply do you want to follow that insight? Because all of these things are like breadcrumbs. Yeah. They're all breadcrumbs. All these experiences, near-death experiences of expanded consciousness, archetypal, things, even visitors, or all of it. These are just archetypal features in consciousness that can be breadcrumbs that point you back to your true nature. So I'm always curious at that point, how motivated are you to really investigate and go deep, go down the rabbit hole?
The DMT experience, that's a little different, it seems, than other psychedelics in that it's kind of this almost same space everyone describes. I mean, I saw a video recently, Brian Johnson, the biohacker, kind of
I'm not sure
studying, he's kind of using his life as an experiment.
Yeah,
longevity.
I have heard of him, yeah.
So he did 5-MeO DMT recently, and he was on a podcast talking about it. And it's just really striking the way, I just kind of use him as an example because he's kind of this scientific guy and did this for the first time.
You're in the depths of existence, like this. It's just the most majestic experience achievable by intelligent life. I just can't imagine anything more miraculous. You basically experience raw consciousness and raw intelligence. It's this. So when I say these words, take these words that I convey to you, take that idea, multiply it by 1,000, and then move out infinite depth, infinite width and depth, and then dimensions.
This experience sounds similar in a lot of ways to just the awakened experience, but what is that in relation? Is that just like a temporary glimpse at something real, or?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I did 5-MeO DMT because I was curious about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it didn't change anything at all.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an intense experience, but it didn't change this. Everything he described is realization.
That's the shifts you've.
Yeah, but you can live it and not just get it for 5 minutes at a time. I actually thought it was hilarious because when the drug experience just dissipated and it's gone, it's like gone in 10 minutes. For me, it was completely, absolutely gone.
Yeah.
It was funny because I remembered so many people saying like it took months and months to like integrate what happened, or like was really destabilizing and all this, and I thought it didn't change anything.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny.
So it's just a more intense experience during it.
It was an energetically intense experience.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like being plugged into a light socket. But a lot of things do that to me. Like my body has powerful, like I'm very sensitive to energetics, and I already have powerful energetics moving through it. So it was just a physically and energetically powerful experience. But the openness, the wonder, the what he's describing is non-duality. He's describing no boundaries, boundlessness.
Okay.
And that clarity is always here. So that's the beauty of realization, is you don't have to take anything for it. But
Right.
it is that radical in a sense. Yeah.
So I mean, is this a shortcut, or like you won't necessarily have a permanent shift from taking
You're not going to have a permanent
drug?
shift from
it's
that.
just like a temporary glimpse, and you can kind of reference it like, okay, I remember that was crazy. So
Things like that are probably good for breakthrough. So like you've never had any sort of breakthrough, or you have a very materialist mind, or very identified with thought. To get, you may hear me pointing over and over and over, like I have in this interview, to unbound consciousness or to what is previous to thought. But if your mind never quite registers that, that's like getting leverage on your mind, right? Like a strong dose of mushrooms or 5-MeO DMT or whatever.
Yeah.
That's all it's doing. It's just like whoosh, pulling the veil back and just showing you what's there enough that you can start to register that. But you're still going to have to do the work to wake up and clarify all that.
Yeah.
And this is important. We haven't talked about this at all, strangely. When you do this, I should be clear with anyone watching this, when you open yourself up to this degree of consciousness, to this degree of presence, anything that's suppressed inside of you, anything that's repressed, is going to come to the surface. So traumas will surface doing this. There's no like, oh, I want to pick that enlightenment path that has no trauma work in it, that has no shadow work in it. That is not a thing. Some people believe that. Not a good idea. So I would be incomplete in my messaging if I didn't tell you the truth about that. So taking substances like that, that's why when people do, psychedelics, or they have shifts, or they have deep openings and awakening, the repressed material comes up. And you have to work through it. And that's okay. There's ways to do it, but you should just be aware of that. So taking something like 5-MeO DMT, if you've never had any opening at all, that's why some people say, they have very, very difficult experiences for like 6 to 9 months afterward, because all this repressed material is like coming up now. It feels like resistance patterns. It feels like doubt and all these, whatever, shame, all the things that were repressed due to mind identification, they've been released up into consciousness. So just be aware of that. That's always part of this deal as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth it, but it's some work to go through that stuff.
Yeah. So it just might be kind of premature if you take something like that and you're not.
If you have a lot of trauma, I would be very careful with something like that.
Okay.
If you have like really significant childhood trauma that you haven't worked through or dealt with, then I'd be careful. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just say this: I've met many people in this space who have done a lot of ayahuasca, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, have served it themselves, and even come to the end of what it could do for them. And then they come and we work on deeper realizations.
Yeah.
So it typically runs its course at some point. I mean, it can definitely give openings. It can help with some shadow work, and it's going to do a lot, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, it does, I think, run its course as far as realization is concerned. And then you kind of got to do it dead sober. Yeah. For the most part, yeah. So if I were to describe this experience in the most direct way I can, It's something like a kaleidoscope. But if you think of a kaleidoscope, it's like all the colors and various little shapes, and they kind of look in this like funky array. But this whole thing is the kaleidoscope. And all of the pieces inside that kaleidoscopic image that you would see, every little seeming piece that seems separate from all the other pieces is actually not separate from it. They're just like co-arising with one another all together. So every single piece, every single appearance, every single color, every single sound is co-arising and co-existing, so to speak, with everything else in it. There's a analogy to this in Hinduism called the net of Indra, or net of gems, where every gem is reflecting the light of every other gem in the whole entire array. So if you imagine this whole environment doing that all the time, that experience of complete immersion, interpenetration of all appearances, and a kind of felt sense of everythingness in this, that's probably the best way I could describe it. Another analogy I sometimes will use, I think I used it in my book, is if you imagine walking down a hallway, and it's a dark hallway, but there are lights all the way down the hallway, and the lights only turn on in the portion of the hallway you're in, right? So you're walking, and the lights come on just as you step into that portion, and as you walk past it, they go out behind you. So if you were to watch it from a third-person perspective, you'd see a body walking down the hallway, and the lights are only lit up where the person is walking. Now imagine there's no body. There's just lights flashing. And that makes the appearance of motion. It makes the appearance of somebody. It makes the appearance of something propagating. That's kind of also how this is. It's just appearing out of nothing. Like appearances, colors, forms, sensations, sounds, appearing out of absolutely nothing. But together they can kind of form this appearance of something happening right here, like a local event, a local experience, like in the hallway.
Okay.
That's also sort of how this is. But it's very, very difficult to get words that are even close to this experience.
Yeah.
Your friend, or the person who described the 5-MeO DMT, that's another really good way to describe it, because it is wide openness, boundless. There's no form or texture that is apart from any other form or texture. So everything is interpenetrated. It is deeply peaceful, clear, spontaneous, endlessly fluxing, has a feeling of innocence to it. And a deep settledness, like it doesn't have to do anything. Nothing has to happen. Everything is complete here. Everything is completely it's like all energy is fully exhausted here into this moment. Dogen has a way of describing that as total exertion. Like the universe is totally exerting itself to create this right now.
Okay.
And there's nothing outside of it.
Is everything going to be okay?
Everything already is okay.
Everything's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. I don't always have the right answers. I don't always have the right pointing. Try what works for you, but be honest with what works. Be honest with yourself about what works, right? Because some things aren't going to work for you, and some things are really going to work or really register for you. So trust your instinct, trust your own orientation to truth, but don't compromise. That's the key.